So the initial introduction was wonderful and was told very much that we're very artist centric. The creative director and the people kind of working at the upper level were artists themselves, so they understood. It was wonderful onboarding with them and getting through the initial process, the design, and then communication trickled to just almost nothing. And then after a while, having worked with them, I honestly was ghosted.
Welcome to the Art Plus Audience podcast. Well, hello. Welcome back to the Art Plus Audience podcast. I'm so excited because I am here with a very talented surface pattern designer and creator, Juliana Tipton. Hi, Juliana.
Hi.
So happy to have you here. You may not know this, but when I look at my saved Instagram posts of like some of my favorite little motifs in surface design, so many of them are yours, just so you know. Yeah, for years I've been saving. It's true. My team could tell you. I just love your work. And I just would love for everyone to get to learn a little bit more about you today. So thanks for joining me.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and excited to meet you.
So why don't you take off by telling us more about you, where you live, what you do, the whole Juliana shebang. Go for it.
Yeah, I live in San Diego, California, sunny San Diego, doing surface design, illustration, textile design, all the good stuff. It's probably my third career. So
Really?
yeah, so I didn't get started in surface design until my early 40s. And I really started to focus on it and say, I'm gonna give this a try. I'm gonna do this was 2020. And it just so happened that way, not necessarily because of the pandemic. A lot of things going on at that time. So it seemed like an interesting time to pivot. But I have been a graphic designer also for about 12 years. So that's been my main profession for quite a while. And before that was a completely different career. I worked in higher education. I worked at a university for another 10, 11 years. So
Wow.
my graphic design was a pivot. Then I pivoted into surface design. But the graphic design started because I think at my core, I really had a love for illustration, for pattern design, for things that were surface design without really knowing that's what it was.
Yeah. We have a lot of people that we work with who have the background in graphic design. And you mentioned some of the things that it kind of brought to the table that were strengths, like working to deadlines and needing to turn around concepts quickly, obviously, and learning to kind of adapt depending on the client's needs. Like those are super great skills and they're hard for a lot of people. So you having that experience is stellar. But what were the drawbacks do you feel like when it came to joining the surface pattern design world and the way you've been working before? Like what were the things that made it harder?
Well, I'll be honest. Going into it, I just thought, wow, I am a one-woman band. So it is going to be all me, all on me. Some of the graphic design experiences that I had is a huge mix of working in, larger agency, smaller agency, boutique agency, freelancing on my own. I've kind of done a mix of everything. But what I really love and what I really enjoy most out of working in graphic design is when I get to collaborate with others. So I'm always at least trying to be part of a team, and I've landed in some really fantastic partnerships with a couple of agencies that I still work with. And it's nice because it's, remote. I'm a little bit independent, but it's still that team collaboration atmosphere. So that was one thing that was very hard starting in surface design and then in illustration because I knew it was just all me.
All you. Yeah.
Part of it was a little freeing because when I first started, and I think it was really great advice that I first got was just create art, right?
Yeah.
A lot of art, a lot of different kinds of art. Don't worry about trying to find your style, just experiment, see what feels comfortable. And then that was really lovely because then when I started making a lot of stuff, I just felt like I like this, but it doesn't feel like me because it feels like I'm reflecting back other styles or other artists that I love and that I really respond to, but how do I make it my own? So that was just that. And then, of course, figuring out all of the business, the pitching and the contracts and the learn as you go. So that part of my experience as a graphic designer in constantly being, here's a topic of something I don't know anything about, but I'm designing something for it. So I need to learn that all the way to skills. Now I'm doing motion graphics. I've never done that. Let's learn that. So those sort of underlying soft skills of constantly being okay with that really teed me up for surface design. But that was really hard. Still knowing like, I'm just doing this on my own for
It
now.
is really hard whenever there's no one there to necessarily push you, even if you are structured and organized and you want it. There are some parts of the job that are less fun than others. I mean, pitching is just like very hard for people. It's hard to get started. It's hard to know if it's the right kind of work and what to say, but you've definitely had some success because like you have like a fabric line, you have licenses with Fringe, which is a great manufacturer on your website. You can find your designs at Barnes and Noble, Target, Indigo, the Container Store. So you definitely segued into it though with some success. So like tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I took some classes. I took some education classes, and hopefully it's okay to share. I started with Bonnie Christine. That's how I discovered just even the definition of what surface design was, and then kind of this world of licensing. And I thought, this is fantastic. And my background in graphic design teed me up so well with a skill set also with Adobe Illustrator. And so I just thought this will be a fairly easy pivot technically.
Yeah.
And talk about also finding a way to have some community around, feeling really alone and starting this on my own.
Yeah.
I'm still friends and connected with people in the small group that I did in her class in 2020 when I started, even online in small ways, being a part of communities that you're creating and that, all these little spaces that I just didn't know were there before. Being introduced to it have been so wonderful. The pitching happened later, and I actually took another class by Shannon McNabb, who
Shannon McNabb, I love her. I mean, I love Bonnie too, but yeah, she's one of my good friends.
love it, love it. So she and I have had a couple conversations too because I took her Pitch Your Portfolio class with Sketch Design Repeat. When I took her class for Pitch Your Portfolio, that for me really resonated in terms of how I learn, how I absorb information, the steps to really tee you up for success very specifically. And that's when I actually started pitching. Also because in the world of graphic design, when I did school there, we created a full portfolio of all our work, like a big book, and it was a
Oh
big,
yeah.
and it was fun. It was a huge challenge and stressful, but it was fantastic. So when Bonnie and Christine introduced the idea of a full portfolio as well, how to put that all together and cohesive, I was like, I understand this. This is exactly the, place that I was coming from before. This translates really well, but it was very overwhelming
Oh yeah.
to do that again. So I loved Shannon's approach of, one sheets, do something very simple, very curated to the company that you're pitching to, try to send things that they can open directly in the email and to just give them a sampling, and that's enough. And then it kind of takes that pressure off a little bit. And yeah, so I started pitching, and the first few emails that I sent out, I actually got responses. I wasn't expecting that. A lot of them were like, your work, this is really fantastic, just not for us right now. Please stay in touch, or, circle back around. And I was like, that's great. At least people are responding to it in a positive way. They're looking
Yeah.
at it. And then I pitched to Fringe Studio. And that was funny because I didn't hear back from them. And so I thought, okay, time to follow up. Had my calendar date. And then I followed up a little bit later than I had even planned to. But so glad I did, because it turns out that the original contact that I had sent it to was not really quite the right contact. But when I circled back around them again, it flagged their like internal email system, and the right person emailed me back and said, we're so glad that you followed up, because I actually sent you an email a week and a half ago and I didn't get it. And I was like, oh my gosh,
Oh
okay.
my gosh.
Yeah. So thank goodness, right, that I kept that, schedule, that
Going.
follow up, so important. So yeah, so that fell into place and felt like that has been a wonderful partnership so far.
Fringe is a great company to work with. I think they also work with a specific type of designer, I guess I could say. Like I see a through line, even if the mediums are different amongst the artists they work with, and you are perfect for it. And your art looks so gorgeous on their journals and everything they have to offer. So congratulations to you and fostering a longer term relationship with a client, right?
Yes. And I was a little not apprehensive, but that wasn't my first licensing deal. So my first licensing deal actually was with Cotton Steel
Yes.
Fabric Company. And that was a very interesting experience for me. It was not, I think, the right partnership for me, but I'm so grateful for that having been the first one. I'm so grateful for the experience and the exposure and the learning that came along through it. And I think it was possible at the time. There were some transitions going on with cotton steel
And RJR
JR
fabrics.
fabrics, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So the initial introduction was wonderful and was told very much that we're very artist centric. You know, the creative director and the people kind of working at the upper level were artists themselves, so they understood. It was wonderful onboarding with them and getting through the initial process, the design, and seeing just, firsthand experience how a collection with them comes together. And then communication trickled to just almost nothing. And then after a while, having worked with them, I mean, I honestly was ghosted.
Oh, yeah.
So
Juliana, I'm not going to speak for other people, but I can tell you that your experience is not uncommon. I hope it's better there because I know the thrill it feels of getting a fabric line like contract, and you don't want anyone to ever feel like they should like be prepared for like, but like they definitely were going through some big transitions. If you were in the fabric world at all around that time, you kind of know what we're talking about.
I'm well aware of life, in general, and, you know, not maybe necessarily in the business world, but certainly in the personal world of just like throwing you for a loop. So I
Yeah.
always try to at least just say, have some grace with them, just try to have a larger view of maybe something that's happening. But I mean, I will say that regardless of what's happening, and I know sometimes it's difficult, like just communication.
Yep.
Something I learned early on as well, also having this be like my third career. I think throughout all of it, I've really learned to, at least I hope I communicate well. That's important to me because even if something isn't right, even if you're like, it's crazy here and everything's burning down, we're fine, I'll get back to you later. It just takes that. It doesn't take much. Like for me, it doesn't take much to just say, hey, I know you're there.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
Let me just interject real quick. Maybe there's something to be said too for like, I think when you learn about surface pattern design and licensing, and you already have kind of like a good eye, and like you clearly were already a skilled, I think, designer in many cases, and you're building a portfolio. What I've noticed is sometimes people look at that first big name client as being like, that's the one that's going to change everything for me. And very, very rarely is that the case. In fact, usually it's kind of like the ones that I don't even expect that are going to explode that end up being the ones where I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so incredible. So I don't know. Sometimes I feel like the universe is playing games with us a little bit. Like, don't get your hopes up too much, but also don't expect it not to be great. So, like, I guess you just have to be present when you're pitching your work and take it one day at a time and take every relationship one day at a time and take the best from it and leave the rest, right? That sounds so like cliche, but yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I've learned too that pitching is just, obviously it's like knocking at the door. And I really just, as long as someone opens the door, like if there's a way for communication, I've sat down to talk with them. And then as you get into it, sometimes you just get a gut feeling. And I'm like, this would be really exciting. And I think it would be really great, but I'm just not sure. And so I've also learned to trust my instincts that if I am not insanely excited about it, like if there's even kind of the remote of a red flag or, oh, I don't know, maybe sometimes it works out, it's good to listen to that. But there's a couple of instances, one kind of major one where I'm like, I don't think this is right.
Yeah.
And so I have to just be okay walking away.
This morning I was journaling and I was literally asking myself, what's the difference right now between my intuition telling me something's off and when I'm just afraid of something? And it's really hard, I think, because life can get really messy. And sometimes I can be very good at knowing. And there are other times where they feel so similar. So, like, maybe for someone who's in your shoes where you were at, like, how would you tell someone the difference between that internal, like, red flag and what if no, you're probably just afraid and overthinking it. What do you think?
For me, and I'm still learning this because sometimes it's not always easy for me to decipher this either.
Yeah.
If I am equal parts, or even if it's not equal, but it's a mix of excited and scared, usually that comes in the form of major imposter syndrome. Like, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? That's usually my indication of, okay, that's just me being scared,
Yeah.
right? But I am really genuinely excited about it. I was talking with this group of students actually and talking about imposter syndrome. And I said, It unfortunately never goes away, but I'm grateful for it because I've over time learned that it's a very good indicator to me of how I'm feeling about something. And it's usually an indicator that it's something that is important to me and that it's something that I should really pay attention to doing. Let that give that subject the focus it needs if I'm feeling kind of imposter syndrome about it. And so when I know that it's something that's not fear, but it's maybe something that is like, this doesn't feel right, like maybe there's a red flag, that's usually not me being afraid of my own capabilities. Usually it's either how I'm responding to another person and what is it going to be like to work with this team. It's usually more about that feels
Yeah.
like, I don't know. Other thing that I learned to pay attention to very quickly is if I even remotely feel like I'm being taken advantage of, that is where you're just like, this doesn't feel good. Like, I don't feel like I should either
Ooh.
agree to this term or this price feels really crappy or really that just, like those kinds of things, if those are like your initial thoughts about something, that's the red flag that feels like, I don't know if this is right, as opposed to, am I going to be able to do this? That's usually telling me that's fear. And yes, I can, and I'm excited about it. So,
That's incredible wisdom, Juliana. Thank you for sharing that. And, if you ever start to feel like you're being taken advantage of, I have both been the recipient of it and someone who has not understood what I have offered as being like low for an industry when collaborating with someone. So I have learned the best thing before you say it's done is to just counter back and be like, hey, I want more, which is funny because I used to be afraid to ask for more money for myself when I was the one in the position. And then once I was in, like, we'll say the driver's seat in my little world where I'm running Gingerbread and, you know, having people work on the projects with me. And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm just throwing a number out there. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, this is why people need to respond back because, like, ask for more money, ask for clarification. If you feel like it's not right, ask for it. And then if they still are like, no, this is a you problem. And gosh, that's the worst feeling in the world. Is whenever someone's like, no, you are mistaken. You are asking for too much. Then it's, gosh, it's so horrible. I hate people having to experience that, but like people need to be able to let them fully show you who they are and then run away.
yes, I had pitched to my very first agency. I don't know if this is something that I'm going to enjoy doing, but let me pitch and have a conversation with someone and just see what is this all about? Is this something that might be a good fit for me? They were large and I was very happy that they responded to my work. So I had a conversation. I had many questions. They sent me a sample contract to look at just so I could see generally these are the kinds of terms and things we do. Here's the fees and how everything works. And that was an eye-opener because I didn't know that about agencies, that there's certain fees that you pay throughout the year as being represented as an artist. I've had some experience in technical reading, not necessarily that that's super prepared me for reading like legal contracts
But
and
it's
documents.
shown you when there's contradictions.
Yes, and it taught me to read through everything and like say like I have absolutely no idea what this means. Like write notes on it, right? And just
Yeah.
if you don't know, ask. So yes, asking questions is so important. So during this interview, I had highlighted all these areas of the contract, and this is something I also wasn't prepared for in surface design that I quickly learned. All contracts are so different. Whether or not there's areas that are industry standard for certain areas or markets or verticals of whatever the product is, they are all so individual and so different that you have to go through and ask questions. And most likely every single time I get a contract, I look at something and I'm like, I have no idea what that means. So the questions around that to ask are so important. And in this interview I had with this person at this agency, she said, wow, I've never had someone ask me so many questions for this. And she even said, maybe this isn't right fit because this really shouldn't, this isn't supposed to be that hard.
So often when I've directly worked with people, the good fits are the ones where it's like a conversation. Like, yeah, you should want your artist to ask you these questions so they understand. Like that's important because you're going to get the best work and best relationship out of that artist. Like, unless you think everyone's disposable and you just don't care if they do well or not. And like, that's really crappy. So read through it slowly. Like, don't you feel like a lot of artists just are like, they just won't look at it. They'll just put it aside and they just won't look at it. And then they'll just close their eyes and sign it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really intimidating, especially when you get this enormous contract. You're like, I have no idea what I'm reading. Just so for me, I always open it in, some sort of software program where I can take notes right along with it. So Adobe's great for that. You know, you can just comment all the way through it. I just highlight, asking myself questions. So I like to do an initial read through. Anytime I get hung up on something or stuck and I say, does it mean this or does it mean this? I kind of write questions for myself. Then I let it sit for a little bit if I can, go back and reread through my questions and see if giving it a little time and a little sit and then rereading it again lets me answer those questions. Because sometimes I'll miss something in the moment. I'm like, well, what about this? And then 2 sentences later, I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll do that. But sometimes even with those, I'll leave them and say, my initial reaction or my initial understanding of this sentence or paragraph was this. Is that right? Or is it, even if I ask in a conversation language about, can you clarify if it's this or this, or am I understanding that correctly? Sometimes if I'm going through that with an art director and they are not the right person to go through that information with, or whoever the person is, or if they just don't have time, then I think it's really wonderful to get a lawyer, get some legal advice. But for the most part, everything I've had questions on and been able to ask directly because I've formed those questions to myself and then tried to answer or figure out. And then if I can't, I'm able to say, sort of, is it A or B or am I close? And then if they can clarify that way, that helps me too, because then I also know that's how I absorb information. If I'm framing it in a way for them to answer that I know I'll understand it.
There's just a lot of different ways. It can be super intimidating to get a contract. Something else I just want to touch on is there's a power imbalance, I think, for so many people in these positions where they feel like I shouldn't ask. I'm grateful for them to have even noticed me. And, very rarely have I actually worked with a company that actually embodies that feeling that we have. Like there are a couple of people I've worked with where I'm like, oh, they definitely look at me as a commodity, or someone I've talked to and we haven't worked with, they kind of just viewed my art as expendable and my opinions. But usually what I find is that idea in my head that I had early on, like, I'm just so lucky that they're even looking at me. Usually it's just someone else on the other side. And good partnerships, like you said, start with good communication and the ability to ask questions respectfully and receive answers and hopefully meet in the middle. Right?
Yes, absolutely. What is the worst thing that's going to happen if you ask a question? I mean, the worst thing that I've had happen thus far is just, the response was, wow, I've never had someone ask me this many questions before. This feels really, maybe this isn't a good fit because it really shouldn't be that hard. And I didn't take that personally of, oh no, I'm asking too many questions. I've upset them. It was, okay, if you are feeling that and, verbalizing that with me, then maybe this really isn't the right fit. Yeah, because my initial instinct of that was exactly, why wouldn't you welcome questions? Why wouldn't you welcome working with someone who is paying attention, right? And wanting to understand how you do business so I can best show up, prepare to work in the way that you want to work with artists. I do wish in the beginning it was a little more apparent to me that, you know, within a couple of years and a couple of licensing deals, while that is amazing and wonderful, it is nowhere near what's going to get me to be doing this full time, like full
Oh,
support
yeah.
financially. So even for me, after doing this 5-6 years, I am still simultaneously doing surface design, illustration. I'm still doing graphic design, also because it's wonderful and I work with amazing people. But I'm still doing all those things, so it's doing a lot. It's a lot
It
of
is.
balance. And I wish I had known that, yes, most licensing deals, especially early ones, are going to be very small. And so for that, it's not about, yes, I've got the financial gain with that. It is really about, I've got the experience. And sure, some of that is also I'm working with a great company, so there's going to be some good exposure here. Understanding if you can glean the value out of that, I just think for me it would have been a little less jarring at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I can appreciate that now because, yeah, I mean, I'll just say no one prepared me for one of my very first quarterly royalty checks that was 83 cents.
I tell that story in everywhere I can. My first royalty check was like for magnets and it was like for $1.50 or something. And it was my first taste of it. And I was like, give me more. Like, which is ridiculous. But, I'm going to touch on two things you said. That's why I think, speaking of Shannon McNabb again, the surface design industry survey that she's been running for years is so important. And I'm a huge champion of it. And every year I partner with her to try to spread the word because the more we can get people of all different stages of their career to submit their information, like I've been privy to the data, I can see it. And you're right, like the amount of money that people are taking home with licensing alone, especially people who've been in it for only 5 years. I've always been transparent. It's multiple income streams to build it up so you can live off of it. I've been saying that from the beginning. That's how my career was built. The second thing I'll say is that's why, like, the book that I have coming out called The Artist Side Hustle, what's funny is I'm not trying to make everyone just work themselves to the bone with this, but I'm trying to get permission for the fact that, like, if you're only making side income from your art for a long time, you know what? That's okay. That's actually super normal. And that's what the industry survey that Shannon runs confirms is that it takes a while to build this up, And I don't think that's something to be embarrassed of or a sign that you're doing something wrong. I think we need to normalize that this is part of the journey. And like, giddy up. You're signing up for like hopefully a lifetime of career growth, but it will take time.
I 100% agree. And I also absolutely champion what Shannon had started with the survey because we need to start normalizing and talking about generally income in this field, income equality for women, to continue that conversation and then speaking louder in that because it's been a conversation for a long time and we need to keep it going. I think this is a truth in most creative fields.
Yes.
We just need to start having more of an open, transparent conversation around money and value. Normalizing saying doing more than one thing, even if those things are very, very different in a creative space, I
Yeah.
think would be great because it kind of feels like you should be one thing or the other. It's okay to do both.
Well, I think it's like this, I teach courses, you mentioned other courses, and the purpose of a course is to hopefully give someone a roadmap, right? But you have to know, and I say it up front, it's a generalized roadmap based off of my experience and what I've seen other students do. But dude, you're going to offshoot and go in other different directions. And like that is just a roadmap to give you a pointer. And if you've got to go over here and then go over here and then kind of do both this and you're doing the splits and coming back, like that's every entrepreneur's journey. And that's normal and that's okay. And I think what happens is people are hoping for that magic shortcut. As someone who's on this side of it and has gotten to see like firsthand impact of what I teach, like out in the real world and in motion, it's really, really important to be honest about the journey, honest about the hard parts. I don't think anything's not hard. I think we want that fantasy, and it's just a matter of if it's the right hard for you, right?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Is this the right hard for you? I love that. Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
And I'll say for you, thank you for sharing candidly about your experience with your first fabric line because, like, no one ever wants to say the thing that might sound a little bit negative. I guess I'll say that, like, the communication part that you said, that means that they're getting to know, they know that you care about this just as much. They care about you as the artist, they care about your success. Those are the best partnerships to have. And it's hard out there if you're not connected to people. And I don't mean connected like I got an in with so and so, but like it's vulnerable to be the person who's the creative, who's used to getting to work in isolation and then like building these kind of relationships with people. You never know where they're going to lead. And I think that it just is a testament to how well you've communicated and built up these professional relationships because like Fringe is awesome. And if they're opening other doors for you, then that's probably because like you've shown up and done excellent work for them and they put that trust in you. And so like don't we all want to be that artist who whenever someone's thinking about like who to refer for this thing like, "Oh, I know, it's this artist that I've been working with for a while. You should definitely check them out." So you're that. You're that, Juliana. That's great.
Thanks. I just know for me, it's so important to show up that way. I mean, I don't ever want to put myself into something without that integrity there. So that's important to me to show up that way. I'm just always kind of, I've just always been built that way. So that might not always be reciprocated, but it usually is, right? If I know that I want to show up that way, if I want to foster that, I'm usually met with that. So it does. It feels really good. And it's not every partnership is going to be right for every person, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of us artists out there, and there's you know one thing that I do still hold on to that resonates so well with me that Bonnie Christine had early on said is that there's room for you. Oh my gosh. And there absolutely is, because if you just think about like maybe the way that I create or the type of work I create, but also who I am and the way that I like to work, that might not always jive with companies that either like to or need to work in a certain way that works for them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just as important to, you know, to find out. And if that's not a fit, that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
And so it feels really good knowing that there's so many of us, because that means there's room for everyone. And that fit that wasn't right for me, that's going to be a fit for someone else. And hopefully they'll send that pitch email, right?
End it. So
So
as we wrap up, Juliana, tell me, like, if you could 5 years from now, you said you've been doing this for about going on 6 years-ish, and imagine that you've doubled your time. What would you want to have seen happen in the next like 5 to 6 years of your career?
oh my gosh, I don't know how prepared I am to do this, but I would love to do like a book cover illustration. I started this whole career to thinking like I can't illustrate, and then I just started to draw, and I loved creating patterns, and it's kind of how this all started, just very generally. So even now, I have the imposter in me saying, I don't know if I can illustrate, but I'm so excited by it that I'm thinking like that would be amazing to do some book illustration. That
Book
would be
illustrations. All right, putting it out there. Juliana Tipton would love to do some book illustration, cover art, whatever is available that is a good fit. So we're just gonna put it out there. And when it happens, because it probably will happen, please let me know. Thank you so much for being here today. And remind everyone who's listening where they can find you online so they can
awesome.
support you.
Oh, sure. So you can find me online at julianatipton.com. You can also find me at JewelTipDesign on Instagram. And
Awesome.
I'm slowly building up an email newsletter. I love doing the email newsletter, but I rarely know exactly what to say. So really, it's just me saying, here's what I'm feeling today on this day and what I would like to share with you. So
I think showing up as you are and how you feel is probably the best way to go because, like I said, right now people are not craving the cookie cutter, polished version of what they think success is. Someone like just showing up and sharing how they're feeling and thinking may be exactly what people need. And so, thank you for doing that. That's leadership in this industry to show up that way, honestly. And thank you for being one of those leaders. I appreciate it.
oh, thank you.
Thank you. And everybody, we'll see you back for our next episode of the Art Plus Audience podcast. All right, talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Hey, could you do me a favor? Could you subscribe to this podcast and then share it with one of your best art friends? I'd really appreciate it. And then head on over to Instagram and follow me at the Leverage Your Art account, and you can keep up with all of our future episodes. Thank you so much for your support. It means everything to have you here listening and learning. Bye.